You ever notice those people who just glide through life, hitting goals left and right, got everyone cheering them on?
Yeah, yeah.
Makes you wonder, right? Like, is it just, I don't know, something they're born with,
Mhm.
some secret sauce, better genes,
Right.
fancier school?
Mhm.
What is it?
Totally.
But when you really look closely, often what sets them apart is, well, how they connect with others. It's something we can actually learn.
I think that's so important. We don't make it on our own.
No.
The folks who seem to have it all going for them, they've actually, through their interactions, through how they talk to people, they've built this network. They've built this support system,
Yeah.
and they've also gotten the respect of the people around them.
Yeah.
It really shows just how powerful that human connection is.
And here's what I find super interesting about this whole thing. Every little thing we do, every word choice sends out these signals, right? It's almost like a dog can hear frequencies we can't even pick up on, or a bat, they see using echolocation, stuff that we as humans, we just don't have those senses.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
communicating on this level that often we're not even conscious of, but it's really powerful, right? These tiny signals, they can draw people in or they can kind of repel them without us even realizing it.
We're always broadcasting,
Yeah.
basically,
Yeah.
whether we know it or not. Uh, our our stance or a quick expression that flashes across our face, even how we ask a simple question, all of that contributes to the message we're sending.
So today, the goal of this deep dive is to really unpack these subtle but super powerful communication techniques, right?
Yeah.
You've shared this incredible set of insights, all focused on how we connect as humans, and we really want to boil it down to those actionable things that anyone can learn. What are the nips of magic, as one of the sources puts it, that these successful, super likable people seem to just do effortlessly.
Mhm.
So we've looked at their body language, facial expressions, how they actually talk, the timing, the words they pick. It's all about trying to isolate these things that anyone can learn and put into practice right away.
It's a great collection of sources you put together.
Yeah.
And what I think is so interesting is that it's really focusing on those very specific behaviors. It's not about, changing your entire personality. It's just tweaking, just making these small changes
Yeah.
to how you interact with other people.
Yeah. Let's get into it then. Let's start with something that happens before you even open your mouth, right?
Okay.
First impressions. It turns out that how you look, how you move, how you present yourself visually can account for like 80% or more of someone's initial judgment of you.
Wow.
And that's even before they hear you say anything.
Yeah, what's really interesting is that even if you don't speak the same language,
Yeah.
we can still, just from looking at someone, pick up on so much, like how confident they are, how friendly they seem, even their status.
There's a great story in the material you shared where the author talks about working in different countries,
Hmm.
and obviously they didn't speak the local language.
Right.
But just by observing people, their colleagues, their posture, their expressions, the author could like immediately tell who's friendly, who seemed really confident, and even kind of where they stood within the organization.
And that just shows, how universal some of these signals are.
Right.
And obviously there are cultural differences, but there are also just those fundamental aspects of body language that just seem to cross those boundaries.
Right.
And the important thing to remember is that those initial nonverbal signals, they stick.
Right.
Like once you make that first impression, it can be so hard to change it.
Okay, let's get into a very specific type of nonverbal communication. Eye contact. The material you shared talks about this idea of sticky eyes.
Yeah.
So it's holding eye contact with someone even after they finish speaking. And then when you break it away, you do it slowly, reluctantly, almost like you're separating something that's a little sticky.
You know what's so powerful about sticky eyes?
What's that?
It's the level of engagement that it shows. Like it goes beyond just looking at someone.
Right.
It shows that you were really paying attention and that you respect what they had to say.
Yeah.
It's like you're saying, I'm here with you in this moment.
Yeah.
Do you think there's ever a situation where that kind of intense eye contact could be, I don't know, misunderstood?
That's a good question. I think it could depend on, the cultural norms, maybe the specific relationship between two people.
Yeah.
But in general, the idea is that intense eye contact actually builds respect and connection. And it can also make you seem smarter,
Oh, it's
like you're more of an abstract thinker. The thinking is that abstract thinkers, they can process information internally without having to break that gaze.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It does kind of suggest mental flexibility,
Right.
being able to focus and take in what someone's saying while keeping that eye contact. And then there's that Yale study, remember,
Yeah, the Yale study.
that really highlights the power of eye contact.
Yeah.
At first, they just wanted to prove, more eye contact, people feel more positive about you.
But it turned out to be a bit more nuanced than that, right?
Right.
More eye contact, a little more than normal for men and a lot more for women, actually shows that you're understanding and respecting the other person.
Yeah, like you're saying, I'm not just hearing you.
Mhm.
I get it, and I value what you're telling me.
Exactly. It's deeper than just the words.
Yeah.
And I imagine professionally mastering the sticky eyes thing, that could be a huge advantage.
Oh, totally, especially if you're, dealing with customers.
Right.
It shows you're trustworthy, that you know what you're talking about, and that you really want to help.
Okay. Let's move on to another really important facial expression, the smile. But the source material makes a big distinction between, genuine, full-on smiles and those kind of quick little half smiles.
Yeah, yeah.
They give this great example, this anecdote about Carla and little Willie. So Carla, she'd often just give these small kind of fleeting smiles.
Yeah.
But then there's this moment where she gives a full, warm, genuine smile to this little boy, Willie, who's tugging at her skirt. And it totally changes their interaction. It was like the big smile, just pulled him in,
Yeah, yeah.
And the material talks about how it appealed to Willie's inner infant,
I love that, appealing to the inner infant, right?
Yeah.
It's such a vivid way to explain it. It just conveys so much warmth and openness and makes the other person feel seen,
Yeah.
like welcome. And comparing it to the half smile, it really shows the difference between, just doing something socially and really truly engaging with someone.
Yeah. And they emphasize that those full smiles, they should feel like they're for that specific person.
Oh, yeah.
It shouldn't be like this generic smile you just, plaster on all the time.
Yeah.
They even talk about this character they call Strobe Man, whose smile was so fake feeling because it didn't have that personal touch. It wasn't really for anyone.
That sincerity, that's really key, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, if your smile doesn't feel real, it can actually push people away,
Right.
You can make them not trust you. And the idea of changing your smile a little bit for different people,
Right.
that shows real social awareness.
Yeah.
It can actually make you seem more sensitive, like you're really tuned in. It shows you're responding to that specific person standing in front of you.
So you've made a good first impression. Without saying a word, you're using your sticky eyes. You've got your genuine, directed smile going. Now you actually got to open your mouth and say something. And the source material has some really strong advice about those opening lines. Specifically, it says, do not start with a complaint.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, your first words, they set the tone, don't they?
Yeah.
If you start off by complaining about something, that becomes how the other person sees you, You're the complainer right off the bat.
Yeah.
And that can be a label that's hard to get rid of. Why do you think that first negative comment is so powerful?
I think it's because it's their very first sample of your verbal communication style. So if that first 100% is negative, it just colors everything that comes after it. So what should you say instead?
Yeah.
Well, the material suggests asking these open-ended questions that show your passion, that get the other person talking. Ask where they're from, what their connection is to the event. Maybe comment on something they're wearing, something that catches your eye.
Open-ended questions are great, aren't they? Because you get more than just a yes or no answer, right? They show that you're genuinely curious about the other person. And it gives them a chance to share something about themselves that they find interesting.
Yeah.
And asking with passion. I like that.
Yeah.
It adds another layer of engagement.
So take that classic question, right? Where are you from?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little boring,
Right.
But the material you shared, it gives this great example of how to spice it up. They use Columbus, Ohio as an example.
Oh, okay.
Weave in some interesting facts. Like, did you know a lot of big companies test their products in Columbus?
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because it's considered like the most commercially average market.
Oh, interesting.
And they call it the most American city.
Wow.
The idea being if something succeeds in Columbus or if it fails, it's probably going to do the same across the country.
That's pretty clever.
Yeah.
You're taking what could be a really dull question, And you're turning it into this opportunity to share something interesting.
Yeah.
It could spark a whole new conversation.
Right.
And it shows that you're an interesting person,
Yeah.
that you see things, more broadly.
And there's more. There are 15 other cities named Columbus in the U.S., believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
So you could even bring that up, you know? Talk about geography. You never know. Maybe you'll find a connection. The point is, make it interesting, even if it's a common question.
You're being intentional,
Yeah.
thoughtful.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving the other person something interesting to grab onto instead of just going through the motions,
Yeah.
Like one of the sources says, no one's going to listen to you unless they know it's going to be their turn to talk next.
Right.
So these good opening lines, they get that natural back and forth going.
All right. So what happens if there's a lull in the conversation?
Mm-hmm.
Or your mind just goes blank? It happens.
Oh, yeah.
The material talks about this really cool technique, parroting. It's really simple. You just repeat the last 2 or 3 words someone said, but you do it in this sympathetic kind of questioning tone.
That is so simple, but so smart, isn't it? You're
Yeah.
basically telling the other person, hey, I'm listening,
Yeah.
and tell me more about that. That questioning tone, it's like a little nudge for them to keep talking
Yeah.
without you having to come up with something totally new.
Yeah.
Have you ever wished you had this tool in your back pocket?
All the time. So many times someone will say something interesting and my mind just, I don't know, it just blanks for a second.
Uh-huh.
The material actually gives this funny anecdote where the author's friend Phil is picking them up from the airport.
Yeah.
And the author is so tired they fall asleep immediately in the car.
Yeah.
But then there's this more useful story about this car salesman, Paul. He uses parroting really well with a potential customer. So the customer says the car's right for you, and Paul just repeats it, right for you, with that questioning tone. And it gets the customer to explain what they mean.
Exactly. It's like Paul's just repeating those words.
Yeah.
But it gets the customer to really think about why they like the car.
Yeah.
And what they're looking for. It's like such a low effort way to get information and keep people engaged.
And if you want to kind of take a break from actively talking, there's this encore technique.
Okay.
So this is where you encourage people who have a good story to share it with different groups, with new audiences.
Okay.
They give this example of these cruise ship officers who had this crazy story about a midnight rescue mission.
Wow.
And the author would introduce them to different passengers, and say, hey, you got to hear this story.
That's clever, isn't it? Because it takes the pressure off you,
Right.
You don't have to keep coming up with new stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
And people usually love sharing their stories.
Right.
Makes them feel important. And the people listening, they get to hear something interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there are any downsides to this?
Well, the material does mention that the stories might get, a little longer, maybe a little exaggerated with each telling. So you do have to, be mindful of time if you need to move things along.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
You want to make sure everyone's still enjoying themselves, right?
Now let's talk about the overall tone, When you're meeting someone for the first time, the source material is pretty adamant about this. Don't share negative stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Or what they call, your skeletons.
Yeah.
At least not right away.
That's really wise, isn't it?
Yeah.
First impressions are so important, and if you start off with negativity, that can really stick with people. There's a time and place to share those more personal, maybe tougher parts of your life.
Yeah.
But those first meetings, they should really be about building a positive connection.
Yeah. Like they say, accentuate the positive.
Exactly.
And you can maybe bring those skeletons out later,
Right.
Share a laugh about them. Maybe even do a little dance over their bones, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah.
But at first, keep it light.
Totally. Find common ground, share good experiences, and just build that initial rapport through fun, positive interactions.
Okay, so here's a question that comes up all the time in social situations. What do you do? Right. Seems like a pretty harmless question, right?
Yeah.
But material you shared actually suggests that it can be kind of problematic.
It really can be.
Yeah.
More loaded than we realize, I think.
Yeah, in today's world with all the job insecurity and all the different career paths people take, that question can make people feel uncomfortable. It's not just, if someone's unemployed or between jobs,
Right.
even if they have a job, but it's maybe not traditional or not seen as prestigious, they can feel awkward.
Yeah, like they have to explain themselves,
Yeah. Yeah.
justify what they do.
The material gives some I guess not so fun examples, like someone whose job is to cut up bodies for autopsies,
Oh, wow.
or an IRS agent.
Yeah, yeah.
Not exactly, cocktail party chatter.
No, no.
And it can be especially tough for women who've chosen to stay home and raise kids because they might answer, "Oh, I'm just a housewife."
Right, right.
Like it's somehow less important.
That's so true. It's like the question can unintentionally make someone feel less valuable,
Yeah.
or make them feel like they have to define themselves just by their job title.
Mm-hmm.
And when you consciously avoid that direct question, you're actually signaling to people that you're interested in them as a person, not just as a networking opportunity.
Mm-hmm. So if you're not supposed to ask, "What do you do?" how do you find out about their work or how they spend their time?
Yeah.
The suggestion in the material is pretty simple. It's an 8-word phrase. How do you spend most of your time?
I like that. It's much more open-ended,
Yeah.
way less likely to make someone feel awkward.
Right, right.
It lets people talk about their work, sure,
Mm-hmm.
but also hobbies,
Yeah.
passions, volunteer stuff, anything that takes up a big chunk of their day.
Right.
What kind of responses do you think you might get with that question that you wouldn't get with, what do you do?
Well, I think you'd probably get a lot more interesting answers.
Yeah.
Maybe someone would talk about rescuing animals or competitive baking
Oh, cool.
or acting in community theater. It just opens the door to finding those shared interests.
Yeah.
And you get a more well-rounded picture of the person,
Yeah.
beyond just their job. And to really make the most of that opening, the material suggests having these what they call verbal resumes.
Oh.
So instead of having one standard answer, about what you do, you have a few different versions
Oh, I see.
tailored to what might interest the person asking.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, you take a second, think about what aspects of your life might resonate with them.
That's a really thoughtful approach, isn't it?
Yeah.
And shows that you're not just waiting for your turn to talk, but that you're actually thinking about how your experiences might connect with the other person.
Yeah.
It's taking a pretty standard question and making it an opportunity to build rapport,
Right, right.
to find common ground.
Exactly. Okay. We've talked about, starting the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
but what about keeping it going?
Yeah.
Really building that connection. And a huge part of that is active listening, right? The material you shared warns against this really common mistake. Dominating the conversation, just talking about your own stuff.
It's so easy to fall into that trap, isn't it?
Yeah.
We love talking about what we know, what we're passionate about.
Right.
But real connection, it requires you to show that you're genuinely interested in the other person's experiences,
Right.
what they have to say.
Yeah.
If it's just you talking the whole time, it doesn't matter how interesting you think you are.
Right.
It's not going to lead to a strong connection.
Yeah. They give this funny anecdote about this big skier, loves to ski. And they just go on talking about their skiing adventures. And then they finally realize the person they're talking to owns an apartment in Aspen.
Oh my gosh, what a missed opportunity.
Right. Talk about missing a connection.
Yeah.
It's a perfect example of how, getting caught up in yourself can make you miss that common ground. Active listening is about asking good follow-up questions. Being curious about the other person's life. Like if they say they just went to Washington, D.C., ask them about it,
Yeah.
Show that you were paying attention and that you're interested in hearing more.
It makes them feel like their experiences matter to you.
Yeah.
Right? And that can really build rapport.
Another really powerful but subtle way to connect with people is through the language you use.
Mm-hmm.
The material talks about this thing called communication, which is basically just framing your statements in a way that focuses on the listener.
Okay.
So instead of saying, that's a good question, you say, you asked a good question.
Yeah.
You see the difference.
I do. It just feels, I don't know, more personal,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Like you're acknowledging the other person's contribution to the conversation.
Right.
It makes them feel heard.
Exactly.
And similarly, if you're trying to to explain something or convince them out of something instead of saying it's important that.
Yeah.
You'll see the importance of just shifting the focus to them.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's this technique called the premature we.
Oh,
This is where you start using words like we, us, our early on in the conversation, even if you just met,
interesting.
to create this instant feeling of closeness.
I like that.
Yeah, it kind of taps into our need to belong, to be part of a group.
Right, right.
By using those inclusive words, you're signaling, hey, we're on the same team here.
Yeah.
We're in this together.
Right. Yeah.
And it can be really effective in building rapport quickly.
It's like creating a sense of shared experience, even if you just met.
Yeah.
The instant history technique, that plays on that too, doesn't it?
Yeah, instant history. This is where you take a moment from that first meeting, maybe a shared laugh, something you both noticed, and you kind of turn it into a recurring phrase, an inside joke.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So creating this little bond, It reminds you both of that positive interaction. They give a great example with this quack story in the material.
Oh, what's he?
It's just a silly moment, but it becomes a foundation for a friendship.
I love that.
Okay, let's talk about compliments. Almost everyone loves a good compliment, right?
Right.
The material highlights these things called implied compliments, which can be really effective. It's like instead of directly praising something, you hint at it,
Yeah.
Like you say, you've obviously been well.
Right.
Just with genuine warmth,
It's subtle,
Yeah.
but it suggests that they're in a good place,
Yeah.
without being too over the top.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's the killer compliment. This is where you notice something specific, something unique, something genuinely attractive about a stranger.
Okay.
The key is to deliver it privately at the very end of the conversation.
Yeah.
And it has to be believable.
It's like leaving them with this really positive, lasting impression, right?
Yeah.
You notice something specific, something unique about them.
Yeah.
You're showing that you really paid attention.
And because you say it privately, it feels more personal. Like it's just between the two of you. And it becomes the last thing they remember about the interaction.
Yeah, that's great.
And we have these things called little strokes, which are just small verbal acknowledgments, like nice job or well done.
Those little things can go a long way, can't they?
Yeah.
It makes people feel appreciated.
Yeah.
Like their efforts matter, even if it's something small.
And then there's the knee-jerk, wow. This is like instant praise right after someone finishes something, even if it wasn't perfect.
Oh, I see.
You're supporting them in that moment.
It's the timing, right?
Yeah.
It's giving them that immediate boost, even if they know they didn't totally nail it.
Now, what about receiving compliments?
Mm-hmm.
The material gives some good advice on that too. The best thing to do, just say thank you.
Yeah, keep it simple.
Yeah.
Don't try to downplay it or deflect it,
Yeah.
Because that can actually make the other person feel bad.
Right.
It's like you don't value their opinion.
And finally, in terms of compliments, there's the tombstone game compliment. This is about identifying and then acknowledging someone's core self-image, what they'd want on their tombstone.
Oh, wow. That's deep.
Yeah, you're getting at what really matters to them, right? What they're most proud of.
It shows a real depth of understanding,
Yeah.
and appreciation for who they are at their core.
Okay,